into the abyss, where hearts beat in sync. Miss vampires, then it's all red and black, no time to even think. Ooh, yeah. Welcome to Anastasia, the club that never sleeps, where creatures of the night come to dance so deep. Get lost in the music, let it take control. Midnight shadows, we surrender our soul.
Vampires are much stronger than humans. It's their food. And the vampires can be hundreds of years old. But even a newly created vampire is already stronger than human. They have blood bonds. They have discipline. Vampires generally only embrace those who are smart, social, or powerful. They don't embrace weak or the intelligent. Generally not. But what happens if the humans fight back? What if the humans win? Has that ever happened before? It's happened in Baltimore by Night. Hunters have entered Baltimore and they're winning. The vampires are down to 9, and 2 of the vampires were just created a few months ago. So as far as knowledgeable older vampires, 7. So how does that happen? Baltimore is a crime-ridden city, and the hunters have pretty much free reign. The west side of Baltimore, for the most part, the police have pulled out of it in Baltimore by Night. The violence has gotten that bad. 1,000 hunters entering the city and massacring the vampire population. But there's 7 survivors. 2 were embraced after the massacre. But how did the 7 vampires survive the massacre? So we went over Nara, the gangrel, who lives on a Native American reservation, and they worship her like a god. They protect her. They have guns. But she also has gold beehives, wolves, bears inside the forest. It's about a 5 to 10 mile track to get to her location, going through all of that just to get to her. So she's been safe. The other person that we covered was Will Fisher. Will Fisher was a fisherman, funny enough, that was embraced in the 1800s. He lives on his boat, large yacht, with his crewmates who are ghouls. And for a hobby, and he enjoys doing it, he still fishes to this day to generate money and to help feed the citizens of Baltimore. He survived because he's generally out in the sea. And then if anything gets too dicey, he can go jump on his boat and sail out. But that's all we've covered so far. 2 out of the 7. So the other 5 is a mystery. Who is the prince? Is there even a prince anymore? What's going on in Baltimore? So let's start this. Husband and wife, Irish immigrants in the 1870s. It was 1861. Joseph Murphy and Kelly Murphy arrived in Baltimore by boat from Ireland, along with thousands of others. 200 on their boat, but many boats came. They entered Baltimore, big dreams. But it was a bad time in America. There was violence in the street, rioting in Baltimore, political backstabbing. What was going on? Well, they arrived when Lincoln was in Baltimore, giving his large speech about the Union. Shortly after they arrived, the Union took over Baltimore and arrested the military, or the military arrested the police and the mayor. It was a rough time for vampires. The Toreador and Tremere were leaving Baltimore. They were done with it. The prince asked a favor. They asked to embrace fledgling. And then they were in their home. They were studied for months beforehand. Kelly Murphy was an artist coming to Baltimore. She wasn't the best artist, but she was one of the better ones in Baltimore. Also, she liked to be in plays. And she was becoming well known in Baltimore for her skill. She was a charismatic young woman. Everyone liked her. She was cute, but not beautiful, intelligent, not physically gifted at all, but an up-and-coming actress and artist in Baltimore. The Toreador clan static. They loved this. And it just so happened that the Tremere clan took an interest in Joseph also. Joseph was intelligent, one of the most intelligent men in Baltimore. He was a lawyer, a new Irish immigrant who just passed law school, 25 years old, excited. They ghouled him first, and as a ghoul he gave law advice to the kindred of Baltimore. One of the best, their best lawyer that they had under their influence. The Tremere loved smart, quick-witted, good-looking guy. Again, not physically gifted like his wife. But when the Tremeres took his wife, the Toreadors took him under their wing, both newly embraced vampires. He would come into the asylum in Baltimore, and it turned out he was quite the repairman before he became a lawyer. Back in Ireland, he used to build houses, and he used to repair horse and buggy, which was an added bonus to him. But they really liked him for his law. They didn't help much in the Civil War to take the soldiers out of Baltimore. Neither one of them were embraced for that reason. They mostly stayed behind, and he used his knowledge of the law to help get the police and mayor out of jail. The 1880s was a big time for them. The port grew bigger, and the University of Maryland Nursing School opened up. They both started living underneath the university. They did feel inadequate during the Civil War, so one thing that they concentrated on was firearms. They both learned how to shoot. They were scared. What if they got cornered? What would happen to them? Joseph was better with a firearm, than Kelly. He took to it quick, becoming quite skilled. Kelly learned how to use a firearm, but she became mostly interested in knives. She would twirl them around, play with them. She figured she would have more luck using a knife than a firearm. After learning that, they both practiced medicine to a very small extent into what was available in the 1800s. They both studied finance, with the port growing bigger. Them and their ghouls were earning more income than they knew what to do with. So they spent a decade practicing finance, medicine, while he practiced law for the kindred. During this time, she didn't act or do art. That part of her was lost for it was 1890 when the hunters first entered Baltimore. But that wasn't something they were concerned with. They opened the Baltimore Art Society to beautify the public buildings, streets, and open spaces in Baltimore. Kelly wanted Baltimore to be beautiful. She wanted it. She loved America. The hunters scared them, terrified them. Beautifying the city streets was great, but they were too afraid to come out and learn it for themselves. That's when they started really focusing on their vampires. She concentrated on her aspects, bringing it from 3, 4. It was now she could read something that was very useful to her. He, on the other hand, was a Tremere. He learned how to teleport 50 yards, an amazing accomplishment, but also telekinesis. He learned to move things up to about 20 pounds. With this together, they avoided the hunters that they would see. She would read their minds, detect their hostility, and they would disappear around the corner, him teleporting both of them. It kept them safe. It made them feel safe. The fighting got worse. And in the Great Fire of Baltimore, half of Baltimore burned to the ground. It's unknown who caused the fire, but many think Nara caused it, trying to kill all the hunters. More vampires dead. But it wasn't too bad at this point. There were still a couple dozen vampires in Baltimore, and the population of Baltimore was nowhere near what it was today. They felt safer, but they could do more. And that's when Kelly had an affair with a Nosferatu. It was a 10-year affair, but she learned how to become invisible like they do. Only when standing still or not making too much commotion. It was a useful talent that made her feel safe. He on the other hand, focused all of his time as blood magic. The Tremere really taking a hold of his mind. The Tremere clan and its urge for knowledge taking over. It took him a decade, but he finally did it. He could now teleport up to a mile away using only one blood point. He felt he could be anywhere in Baltimore in just a few moments. He was no longer scared. The 1910s saw a great pullback by the hunters, their numbers lost from the Baltimore fire. It was a decade of peace for the vampires, something they're not used to after all this fighting with the hunters. They got back together, falling in love during a baseball game, falling back in love during a baseball game. He took it serious. Practicing baseball became his whole job for this decade. It was so nice to be able to take time like that. She worked on her stamina and alert. She was still scared of the hunters. She was turning around every corner. She managed to learn how to silence herself so that she could detect things. She started looking around every corner. She started looking at everything, always wondering when the next hunter is going to come for them. She was terrified, but he continued on his baseball stint. And for a decade, there was no violence between the vampires and the hunters. Then came the 1920s, Prohibition and the 1918 flu going into the 1920s. Everybody was making money. Joseph became one of the best financial consultants in Baltimore. During that, he learned firearms a bit more, as he was one of the main people bringing alcohol into Baltimore. He became a gangster, a rich gangster. He practiced politics, he practiced finance, and he practiced shooting. She, on the other hand, never got over the fear of the hunters. She didn't practice art. She didn't practice acting, even though the picture movies were coming out. He practiced more hiding, terrified that they're going to be around every corner. Then came the Great Depression. It hit everyone. It hit everyone hard. Despite the money that they made, they lost most of it. It even affected the hunters. They couldn't fund their organization anymore either. So it was a lose-lose for everybody. They needed money. And that's when she finally got back into acting. With the movies coming out, now was the perfect time. Kelly became the most known actress and artist in Baltimore, perfecting her art. Her art becoming world known along with her acting. Now, she always played a damsel in distress that was captured, kidnapped at nighttime, and a hero would have to get her. The daytime shooting in Baltimore, they moved all film shooting indoors with the help of her ghouling some of the highest photographers and filmmakers in Baltimore. They listened to her. So with all the films being indoors, the sun didn't affect her at all. And then, of course, she had a stunt double in case they needed to go out to the sun. But for once, she was happy. She wasn't worried about the hunters anymore. She was doing what she loved. And Joseph was still haunted by the Tremere. The Tremere's desperation to learn more blood magic. He felt his teleport was good enough. Now he worked on his telekinesis, aided by his sire. He learned it to the point that he could move 200 pounds. He could make himself with telekinesis. He could fly. He could sit on a chair. If someone came close, he could flick his fingers and send them across the room. He felt safe. This was it. He could fly away. He could teleport. The hunter would no longer be a threat to him. World War II brought new income and jobs to Baltimore. He kept up with her acting and art. Him feeling comfortable, started learning weather control. He could create an entire fog over a quarter of Baltimore using his blood magic. It was at this point Mary was fed up with him. Kelly was fed up with him. All he does is practice blood magic now. Long gone is the man of finance and law. Even firearms was nothing to him. All he cared about was blood magic and learning more. They divorced during World War II, and he went over to Germany to aid US troops. Vampires, worried about Hitler's extermination of the vampires, worried about Hitler's Nazis coming to Baltimore if we failed in Europe. It was in the 1950s that the fighting with the hunters came back. Violence in the street. The people were fed up with it. Tens of thousands of people were leaving Baltimore. Baltimore's population was declining. He didn't care. He mastered the ability to rain. He could make it rain at will. At will. He was feeling powerful, safe. She read books. She took this entire decade to read, study, learn. She took a break from acting and got a bachelor's degree in medicine. She was helping out at the hospital at night. She found it interesting, mentally stimulating. She embraced another woman in the 1960s. The hunters came in mass, and this was the first wave of vampires to die. The vampires in the 1960s in Baltimore, that's when they started to lose. The drug epidemic overcame Baltimore, opiates flooding the cities, and hunters taking all the profits from it. Mary was put in charge of the University of Maryland's art program at this point. She took a break from medicine, and now she was in charge of the art department. Everyone listened to her for this decade. She kept out the hunters. They would come looking for her, and she would sense them. Joseph, still in love with her, would teleport her out. He discovered the ability to control the wind, and when the hunters would come, fog, rain, and wind pour down over the city. He could teleport a mile away. She could read minds. Together, she could sense danger, and he would get them both out. That's how they survived the first wave. Things got so bad in Baltimore, there was a teacher strike. None of the kids were even going to school anymore. The violence was just so bad. It was here she took over more than this, the art department in the University of Maryland. She became a professor, teaching not only art, but math and English. He, on the other hand, the Tremere Asylum underneath of the University of Maryland, saw the coming danger. A quarter of the vampires had been killed over the past 20 years in Baltimore. And the hunters were starting to figure out his limits, a mile, and they would set up patrols a mile around their target when they would attack. They would attack during the day. Mary and him both back together now, in love, would sleep in the same coffin. And as they would attack, they knew he could only teleport a few thousand feet away, and they had patrols all around the area. It was only through sheer luck, pure luck, and studying that he managed to increase his teleport. It took him half a decade, but he got it up to 5 miles. Too large of an area for them to cover every square foot. Once again, they were safe. They had to sleep together. They had to be together. What use is teleportation if they kill you before you can use it? And what use is seeing the coming danger with telepathy if you can't do anything about it and leave in time, teleport in time? They needed each other and they fell in love again. The 1989 is when the large occurred, the second hunter wave that left only 7 vampires left in Baltimore. It was her ability to make her and him invisible with her Nosferatu discipline, her ability to read minds and warn him, his ability to take her and teleport away. He was worried what would happen if she left him again. Would he be vulnerable? She started teaching him all sex. It took a while, but he learned the first dot of discipline in it. Being able to sense things heightened. She worked on her beauty. She became a clothing line designer. And again, they had money. To this day, they still live below John Hopkins. Him, the last Toreador in Baltimore. I know, she is the last Toreador in Baltimore, vice president of John Hopkins. And him, the last Tremere in the Tremere Asylum. By himself, all the knowledge of the Baltimore Tremeres at his fingertips. He just doesn't have the time to learn it all. And Mary always bugging him about spending time together. He just wants to practice the blood magic, telepathy, teleporting. That is how they survive. And that is how they'll continue to survive as the last surviving vampires in Baltimore.